So, hi everybody. Thank you all for coming to this talk by Jessica Shahan from Newlin Grist Mill about volunteers and as part of the um, Delaware County Historic and Preservation Network effort to try and get sites ready for America 250, which is coming up next year. So without further ado, I'll leave it to Jessica.
Hey, since we have a relatively small group actually on the video, if you guys want to put questions in the chat like as we go through, I think that's fine.
Okay. Mm.
Here we go. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Okay. So yeah, I'm Jessica Shahan. I am the naturalist and volunteer coordinator for Newlin Grist Mill. Um, been full-time here for like 11 years now, working with both nature and environmental programs and building our volunteer program. So if you know Newlin Grist Mill, a lot of people just know it as this view. Driving on Cheney Road, there's that big stone building with the red siding, and that might be all they know. They might think that, oh, they've got a little park or whatever. Um, but we've got so much more going on. We're a private nonprofit. We have 160 acres of property, 8 miles of trails, and about a dozen historic buildings. And we have a dual mission of nature and history. So both conservation, education, restoration, all of those things for both nature and history. And we have stuff going on all the time. Programs, field trips, historic trades demonstrations, big special events, um, habitat restoration work, water monitoring, trail maintenance, all kinds of stuff. But we are a small staff, and we could not do all of this that we do without our volunteers. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what our program looks like and how we've gotten here over the last 10 or so years. And then we'll talk about kind of the idea of how you plan more broadly. And again, feel free to ask questions as we go. So I like to start with numbers. They're just a little more concrete to understand impact than just saying our volunteers do a lot. They do, but what does a lot mean? So in 2024, our volunteers contributed over 7,000 hours to projects, programs, activities on site. That includes around 100 individuals, including families, and 30 community scout school groups, 45 days with field trips on them, sometimes multiple trips per day, 6 large special events, over 260 hours of mowing and weed whacking. And our buildings and grounds volunteers would want me to also tell everybody that that translates to 33 straight 8-hour days of mowing and weed whacking. They are very proud of that accomplishment. Um, we planted 50 trees and over 1,000 wildflowers last year. Volunteers put in over 600 hours in our archives and on historic collections care. And they put addresses on 1,600 pieces of mail. Um, that's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of impact. However, it is important to remember that numbers are not the end all be all of a volunteer program. We're not in it for total hours, we're in it for impact, both impact on the site and on our community. So, talk about some types of volunteers. They come in a couple different flavors. You can have individual volunteers or families. So these are retirees, professionals, neighbors, families, people who support the mission individually out of their own volition and want to help contribute to that mission. We also have different groups that come in. So corporate groups, community groups, places like other banks, other like chain stores often have annual or seasonal service days. There are also community groups, church groups that like to get involved in service. Scouts, service is huge with Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Girl Scouts. Students, many schools have community service requirements, not just like college or high school, but all the way down to elementary school. Um, those guys have like 1 hour of service, whereas, the older students have more, but they all have opportunities to get involved. Um, there's another category of volunteer that we haven't done much with, but I figured I'd throw it in while we're talking about types, and that is individuals with mandated service. So oftentimes this is court or rehab ordered service. For us, again, we haven't done much with it, and it's usually minor things like somebody speeds too much and has too many traffic violations, and they need service. Not anything that would be a concern for like public safety or building access, but that is a type of volunteer that we do see. Yeah, George.
I had a question about that mandated service. I'm in Cobbs Creek Environmental Center in addition to the Lower Swedish Cabin. And at the Environmental Center, we had difficulty with the mandated service because the county was requiring them to wear like yellow or orange vest when they were doing like cleanup along the roads and things like that. And they felt that made them more visible, which was the idea because so they wouldn't get hit by cars. But they were thinking that it was shaming them and did not want to wear the vest, and some of them stopped participating because the vests were required. Do you have anything like that?
No, like I said, we haven't had many of these. Um, and I don't remember that ever coming up. Maybe they just weren't following the regulations they were supposed to, but nobody's ever um come down hard on that point. Um, so yeah, we've got all these volunteers. They do not all contribute in the same way. Different people have different availabilities, different amounts of stamina, physical ability. All of these things make a difference in how they're able to interact with the volunteer program. So it's our program, we try really hard to make sure it's not a one size fits all thing, that we try to meet our volunteers where they are. So like some of our volunteers participate in a specific project. They're there every week, helping to weed the garden. Other volunteers, their time is a little more limited, but they are there every year for all of our historic dinners, and we see them during those events. We may not see them other times, but they are there for those and we can count on them. Then we have other volunteers who, they're there a day or two or three a week, and whatever's going on is what they want to help out with. So they are also flexible. But we try to fit things together. So interests, skills with site needs, so that everybody comes away happy and having made a difference, having progress occur. For us, we don't have a minimum like hours requirement. We don't say like, oh, you have to do 10 hours a month or something like that. Our primary sticking point is that we ask that volunteers tell us when they're coming. And that is so that we can make sure that we have all the tools and equipment that they need to do the job that they're going to be there for. Like if we have somebody that's planning to, paint the porch, we need to make sure that we have the paint there so they're not standing around like waiting for us to pull it all together. We're not wasting their time. We also record hours for documentation. So for grant matching purposes, things like that. But we also take a lot of pictures. Some of that is to go with that documentation, but also it lets us brag about them later. So I do just have to let you know all of these pictures are volunteers from the site that you'll see tonight. And they're all from the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So ways that volunteers interact with our programming. We have a public archaeology program, and we have volunteers involved at every single phase. Excavations, so the actual physical digging, sifting, screening, looking for artifacts, and then also cleaning. So once things get pulled out of the ground, we got to clean them, we got to count them, identify what they are, do all that sort of post-excavation processing. And volunteers help with all of that. We also have our archives. We so this building that you see in the picture is home to both the Newlin Grist Mill archives and also those for the Society for the Preservation of Old Mills, SPOOM. Our volunteers in the archives do a ton of cataloging. We're always getting donations. You have to figure out what we've got, what its importance is, making sure we have lists that are easy to access for researchers, document preservation, a lot of digitizing. So the picture on the right, that's Parker. They've been working on getting all those slides cataloged as to what they are, and eventually we'll get them scanned and available for research. And then we assist with research questions. So people who are restoring other mills will come and say, hey, do you have any information about mills in this county or this particular mill? We also have Newlin family members or supposed family members who come in and they say, I think I'm related to so-and-so. Can you help me figure that out? And our volunteers help with that research as well. Our buildings and grounds guys. This team is amazing. This is my group of volunteers that, they show up between 2 and 3 days a week. We say, here's what we need done today. And miraculously it gets done. You just sort of aim them and they go. They are doing everything from trail maintenance and mowing to building repairs, helping prep for special events, to stocking our trout ponds for stream fishing season or for a fly fishing season. All of that falls under their purview. We also have education, and this looks like a variety of different things. We have field trips and public programs. So the picture on the left is one of our volunteers talking to a group from a school about our millwright shop and how we're building a new water wheel. We have mill tours, just like walk-in tours for the general public that we started having some of our volunteers help with. Historic trades demonstrations, so like the millwright shop, but also our blacksmith shop, and helping with summer camp. So Grace in the picture on the right is one of our assistants, our volunteer assistants with camp. And she's helping out with some of our habitat explorations. They're looking for pollinators in the pollinator garden in that shot. Another way to look at education and volunteerism, though, that I found seems to scare people a little bit, but I enjoy it. Program participants can be volunteers too. And it just makes an overall more rewarding experience, in my opinion. So some examples. On the left, we have students from Ursinus, one of their conservation biology classes. They came out and did a stream study on the West Branch of Chester Creek on site. So we got a report about the health of our water quality. They even documented a new fish species we hadn't found in that location before, and they got to learn all about field techniques. So both parties are getting something out of it. The middle picture there, anthropology students helping to excavate. Again, they're learning. We're getting dirt moved, so we can learn more about some of the outbuildings on the site that we didn't really know that much about before. And then on the right, our summer campers get involved too. So usually at least once per summer, we have an activity that involves giving back as part of camp. Now this activity varies, the 12-year-olds are not doing the same thing as the 5-year-olds. But so in this picture, some of our older campers helped to install a perch for birds in our new wetland. And I will tell you, they have come back, at least one of them has come back twice since summer camp and checked on it just to make sure that it was still standing and still in good shape. We also do environmental conservation volunteerism. So things like tree planting, water monitoring. The picture in the middle, Anthony was helping out with our salt survey as part of Winter Salt Week in January, which was actually a nationwide initiative that we were able to add data to. And then on the right, we've got some scouts installing bird boxes, nest boxes for us. We do a lot of habitat restoration and improvements for wildlife kind of projects that are especially popular with scouts. Then we've got our special events. Like I said, we're a pretty small staff. And last year we had 6 special events. We literally could not pull these off without our volunteers. And they're participating in all areas, whether that's prep, the setup, that sort of thing, the public facing activities during the event, and then all the cleanup that nobody wants to do afterwards. You get to the end of the day, you're tired, but just deal with that on Monday. Our volunteers are there on Monday helping us take care of that. So some examples of the public facing things, we've got a historic cooking demonstration on the left. We also have some more exotic volunteer opportunities, we'll call it, like being the rubber ducky wrangler during our duck race on the Race for the Watershed Day. We have logistics volunteers, so people who are taking care of the crosswalk, making sure people get back and forth safely, handing out event maps so visitors can figure out where they need to go. And then we also try to have a designated special event photographer. If you have not had this before as a volunteer position, it is amazing. So while your staff is running around putting out all the fires during your event, you have a volunteer who's taking pictures. And then you don't get to the end of the day and you only collectively have like 5 pictures among you. So we're actually able to document our special events with the help of volunteers too. And it's made a huge difference. Yeah, George.
You were one of the few other places that I've heard of that does a duck race. We do a duck race at Cobbs Creek.
Yep.
And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about how it's done, how many people participate, do you give prizes, et cetera? What is the object of the race?
Yeah, so the whole day, it starts with a 5K, and then we have duck races and kids activities, educational displays, and it's all relating to water quality, watersheds, water health. And the idea is to support our water-based programming. So things like the data plan for our remote sensing stations, buying water testing chemicals and equipment, stream bank stabilization work, things like that. So that's the overarching focus. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
So, but like, do people buy a duck
Yes.
and then it's raced? Do they have a number on them or
Yep,
something?
they are all numbered, so people
Are
can buy ducks.
there are
We've been
prizes?
selling ducks all the way from like January through, and we'll go on to the day of the event. So they get assigned their number. We have a number of heats. So if your duck wins, you get to go to the next, and so on and so forth. And there are prizes at various different levels, yes. But I don't know like number of participants off the top of my head.
Thanks.
Because this event happens right before summer camp. So my brain is focused on those numbers and not 5K and duck race numbers. But yeah,
Thank you.
it's a relatively new event, but it's been a fun one.
Yeah, ours is a fun one too.
We have special projects. These are projects that do fit under other areas, but are often requiring some next level skill or organization. Sometimes they're very long term. Sometimes they're short, like one day. So examples on the left, we have volunteers and staff working on putting in new gates as part of the spillway restoration. And that's been an ongoing, like 2-year project. Compared to the middle, some of our blacksmith volunteers made iron implements for our restored colonial kitchen. That was a couple-week project. And then on the right, we have a corporate group who came in to help us put up our greenhouse. And that was, one day and done. Go in, get the work done, and now we have a cool greenhouse to help with our conservation projects. So these are just kind of that next level of skill and intensity compared to some of the other ongoing projects. And all of these things kind of feed back on each other and create this really just amazing synergy on site. So our active volunteers are members. They're participating in programs. They're donating to events, to our annual giving campaign. But they're also our cheerleaders in the community. They're always going out and being like, I did this really cool thing when I was volunteering. You need to go see it. Go to the site, go check it out. They're dragging people with them to come see things that they're excited about. They're getting the word out to people who might not otherwise have heard of us before. Some examples of this. So on the left is actually one of my current favorites, examples of this. So Andrew in the middle in his Eagle Scout uniform there, first started volunteering on site with his school. They have 3 days of community service where they divide all the students up and they send them out to different community locations. So the first time he came on site, he helped with tree planting and inventorying some donations of like pictures and documents for the archive. 2 years later, he came back and was like, hey, I want to do my Eagle Scout project here. And he helped us build a new bridge for a spillway going over the spillway into our new wetland. And then just today, he was back with some of his fellow senior students. They, as seniors, they have a requirement of 5 days worth of service to be able to graduate. So he and 3 of his friends are back for the next 5 weeks. And they are working on some garden support, working with the archives, with our archaeology program, and particularly helping Eva, our carpenter, as well with the water box for the mill restoration. So it just all, it keeps feeding on itself, and he's a really good example of that. And then on the right, we have some of our archaeology and buildings and grounds volunteers. And personally, I love this picture because I think they look like some sort of album cover. But also it shows just how proud they are of the work that they have done. Last year, we finished excavating the original wheel pit in the mill, and that required moving a lot of rock, and it was not all little rock. But here they are showing off the last rock that they pulled out of that pit for documentation purposes. And they're really proud of it. They've brought people back on tours to show off the pit before we closed it back up again. They talk about these giant rocks all the time. They are so proud of their accomplishments. And again, it's just all of this building together and creating really cool things. And all of it makes your site stronger. And ultimately helps you meet more of your goals and more of your mission. We also have had this really amazing community build. And so we've got volunteers supporting volunteers, but we also have volunteers supporting staff. And that is just a really special thing that I have not encountered in too many other places, especially with organizations of our size and with the diversity of things that we're doing. We've really worked hard to keep everything integrated, and it definitely makes a difference. And not to sound too sappy about it, but it really does feel more like a volunteer family than just a volunteer group or a volunteer program. Those connections are really nice to have. So with that, you've decided you want to get volunteers on site. The first thing everybody wants to do is rush out and ask people. Don't do that. That is not your first step. That's how you're going to get confused volunteers, confused staff, and things are going to get dropped. The first thing you need to do is strategically plan, do some assessing. So how do volunteers fit into your organization now in the future? What's your ideal fit? How do they help you meet your mission? Are there certain parts of your mission that volunteers would be really good for? Are there parts where it is maybe not as good a fit? Volunteers wouldn't be as effective trying to work on that sort of project. How can they share your goals with the wider audience? How can they support the staff? But also flip it around. What resources do you have to support volunteers? Do you have the time to recruit them, to train them, to supervise them? That is huge. Do you have the tools that they need? If you have 50 volunteers coming to plant trees, do you have 50 shovels? If you don't, do you have enough in your budget to supplement? Do you have a plan for supplementing? And then how many volunteers can your resources support? You may want 50, but realistically, you can only support 5 with what you've got right now. It's better to know that before you start asking than after you've recruited 50 people. Otherwise, it gets kind of crazy and chaotic. The other thing to remember is that volunteering is a two-way street. As much as we say that volunteers do it out of the kindness of their hearts, they're getting something back from it too. They are doing a volunteer activity because they want something. It could be just the, good feelings, the happiness from making change. But it could also be learning new skills. It could be being part of a community, gaining new friendships. Having a chance to get out of the house is huge. Some of our volunteers really, really, really like the whole getting to be behind the scenes at the museum, that they really value that. So ultimately, you need to figure out how your needs and your resources overlap with the needs of your volunteers. And once you've got that kind of picture in your head, you can start drilling down on specific numbers and structure, like supervision structure, timing, things like that. Important here to consider what kind of volunteers you want. Certain tasks are better for different kinds of volunteers. So here on site, we have some projects that are really great for individuals who just want to come in and do something. We have a volunteer who just finished, after a year and a half, inventorying a donated collection in the Spoon Archive. It took her forever. It was a huge collection, but she did it herself. She came in every Wednesday and dug into it for a couple hours. And she just really liked being able to focus for that period of time that she had. Other projects, probably not suited to one person by themselves. A little better for 2 to 5, 6 people. We had a big tree fall down across 2 of our trails on Friday. That's a good project for our buildings and grounds crew to come help with cleanup. You don't want to clean that up by yourself. You also don't need a dozen people getting in the way of the chainsaw. There are other tasks that you really do want a huge number of people. If you've got 100 trees to get in the ground in one day, 5 people is not going to cut it. That's where you want to reach out to the scout groups, the community groups, the corporate groups, where you can really have a lot of people on set, a lot of hands making a big difference really quickly. Then other things to consider are the specific communities of volunteers you might want to tap into. Are you specifically hoping to work with students? If yes, what ages? High school, college, grad school? Where does that fit in? Are you looking to make connections with seniors? Maybe you have a specific senior center down the street that you want to connect with. Are you looking to reach out to communities for individuals with disabilities? Maybe you really, really, really want people in wheelchairs on site. You want to increase that visibility. That's something that's important to your organization. include that in your strategic planning. Maybe you're like me and you love working with scouts. So I tend to make a point to ask scout troops specifically. Those are all questions you need to be asking yourself before you do any of the asking, the public facing asking. And it's just going to streamline everything and make development and building that process or that group a lot smoother than otherwise. So the next question, and I get this a lot, is how do you find them? So you've put together your volunteer program format. You want to get your volunteers in the door. It's important to find the right outlet, the right places to do the asks that are going to get the volunteers that you decided you want. So these are all outlets that we have used. I have them listed in order of effectiveness for our site, but this may not be the same for your site. Different resources, different strengths lend themselves to different ways of asking, but this is what has worked for us. So our top way we get volunteers is people talking to staff and current volunteers. And I put this picture on here because, so these are some of our volunteers from this last year's 5K and duck race. They ran the registration table for the race. They sold ducks all day. These guys also help out with our happy hours. They have had so much success directing people to me to be like, hey, I was talking to this person and they said that you do this volunteer thing. I would like to try that. It works really well. Similarly, we've had people walking their dog on site and they see our archaeology volunteers and they're like, what are you doing? That looks really cool. Oh, you're volunteers? Well, I want to be a volunteer. How do I do that? We've actually, some of our buildings and grounds crew are volunteers because they were on the property and they saw somebody cleaning up a tree. And they were like, that looks like fun. I want to do that. And now they volunteer with us 2 to 3 days a week. So just having that exposure to people who are involved in the program and the projects, who are excited about those things, and can really explain why they're cool and introduce enthusiasm into potential volunteers. It makes a huge difference. Networking is another one. So this is also where our volunteers are kind of doing the work for us. So they're out there talking about the really cool thing they excavated, or how they got to plant trees, or they learned all about native plants because they were working in the pollinator garden, or now they know how to run a grist mill. They've learned all these really cool things and they go out to their friends and their family and they talk about those really cool things. And then you start to get those people filtering back, which is always fun. We get targeted recruitment. So this is a little bit more specific of an ask. We're looking for specific skills or for specific tasks. So rather than just saying, hey, we need volunteers, we're saying, oh, it sounds like you're really interested in native plants. Did you know we have a pollinator garden on site and volunteers help us with that? So you're just kind of opening the door and matching those skills and interests. We do sometimes get a little more specific. Things like, oh, I hear that you are good with carpentry. Well, we have this project that we could use some help, some additional carpentry work on. Would you be interested in contributing? And those kind of directed asks, that more finely honed ask, is also quite helpful. Yeah, George.
The number of construction projects that you have, restoration, repair, the physical plant issues. It seems to me that a place like Williamson Free Trade School that's relatively close by would be a great place for you to recruit.
They do. They do a service week every year. They have been a major help with building all of the new boardwalks around our frog pond and our wetland in the last few years. They've also built, we had a bridge wash away in the flooding we had in 2020. They built us a new bridge. They've helped with fixing some trail erosion, repairing weirs in the creek to keep the pools going for our trout. Yeah, they've been a huge help. They're an awesome resource. And I think they like our site too, because we're not just doing construction, we're doing historic construction, and it's something a little different for them. They also make a point, especially during their service week, to put students on projects that require skills that are not in their area. So this year we have a lot of people from their electrician program coming out. So it's one of those volunteering as learning opportunities as well. And I really like those. Let's see. We do on-site advertising. So this is things like flyers, posters, putting them up in bulletin boards, in bathrooms, having announcements at our front desk, wherever there's easy points of communication on site between the people you have on the ground and, your volunteers, your staff. That one has not been as productive for us directly. We are more likely to get, my friend saw a flyer on site and they told me that you have volunteers here, as opposed to I saw your flyer on site and I want to volunteer. So it's a little bit second degree advertising. Volunteer affairs. I did put this one lower on our list, primarily because of the effort to results ratio, which is something to consider if you have a small staff, if you are time constrained. We've gotten really amazing volunteers from going to volunteer fairs. However, we have had to talk to a lot of people in order to get those few individuals. They're awesome, they're worth it, but it is a lot of work. And if you have, time constraints, if you have manpower constraints, that may not be the outlet for you, which is something to consider. And then online advertising. Obviously, there's your website, there's your social media, those are all great. But you can look at other volunteer platforms as well. So these are databases that people go to saying, I want to find a volunteer job. And they can search by type of activity, by location, all these sorts of things. And it gives them a whole list of opportunities that meet their requirements. Examples would be like Volunteer Match, Idealist, Just Serve. There are college and high school versions as well. The key with these, if you're going to use them, you have to update them regularly. If it looks like your entries are old, inactive, it's actually a turnoff for volunteers. And that's a hurdle for us. I don't get a lot of time at certain points in the year to do as much updating as I should. So it's not as effective a platform for us. The other thing is some of these do require subscriptions to be really effective. The free version gets you like 50 views. The subscription gets you 5,000. It just depends on what platform you're looking at. And then the big thing, just ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be embarrassed. You just get the word out there. We have found that the targeted direct ask works the best. Get out there, ask a bunch, ask all the time. It's okay. If they don't want to, eventually they'll tune you out. That's fine. Ask in multiple ways. Ask verbally, ask in print, ask online, whatever your different avenues for getting information out there are for your organization. Put them all out there. It may not click for somebody seeing a sign in a bathroom or on a bulletin board, but it may click if they see it on Facebook. You don't know. You got to get it out in as many different ways as possible. And hopefully one of them will work for each different person. Ask specifically. Like I said, don't just say, hey, we want volunteers. That doesn't really do much. Say, hey, we're looking for volunteers to help us plant trees on Earth Day. We're looking for people to come help be trail guides during the 5K. That is a specific concrete thing that communicates a time frame. It tells them what to expect in terms of effort. You know, if there's skills involved, they can judge it and be like, yeah, that's something I could do, or no, that's not something I would be able to get involved with. Personalize the ask where you can. So a lot of times I'll do this before special events. I'll say, you know, hey Dave, are you willing to help with parking at Fall Festival this year? And he'll say, sure, that was great. I enjoyed that last year. Sign me up. Or he'll say, no, I'm busy. I can't help this year. Or he'll say, I totally forgot to put that on my calendar. Thanks for the reminder. I would love to help, but please do not put me anywhere near parking again. I will do anything else. You have that one-on-one conversation and you plug your volunteer into a place that's going to keep them happy. You won't know unless you ask. Don't be overly aggressive. Don't be like in their face about it. But, get it out there. Don't be mean if they say no. That's okay. They can't make it. Our schedules don't work with everybody. But what you're doing is getting the word out there, kind of building that like community collective understanding that your organization is a place to go for volunteer opportunities. So when you have a scout who needs service hours, or a club that's looking for hours, or somebody who's just retired and they want something to do with their time, they're like, oh, I heard that organization has volunteers. Let me go check them out. And it all makes a difference. And again, if it doesn't work for them, maybe they know somebody that it will work for. So it's that networking at all those different levels. Got some behind the curtain kind of sausage making stuff to consider as well. This is tied into your strategic planning. These are things you want to be thinking about both before you get volunteers on site and over time as you're evaluating your program consistently to make sure it continues to thrive. So you figured out how you want volunteers, you asked, you got people to say yes. Now you need to get them integrated into your operation. So what does that onboarding process look like? Do they need an interview? Or are they just filling out an online form and showing up? What kind of paperwork do you want from them? Do you need an emergency contact form? Do you want a bio? Do they need background checks? Do they need liability waivers for what they're going to be doing? That's all information you need to know before your volunteers set foot on site. You need to be ready to go with that paperwork in hand when they walk in the door. If volunteers are waiting for you to get your act together, they're not coming back. They're not having a good time. Communication is huge. You're communicating expectations, and you're also communicating opportunities, what there is to do. So in terms of expectations, a volunteer manual or a volunteer handbook is really helpful. It specifically says, this is what we expect. This is how you go about doing it. Often people, you walk through it on site with them, but only 50% of it sticks. They want a document to go home and review before they come back in the next time. And you may need to go over it a couple times before it all sticks. But having something that they can refer to really kind of boosts their confidence, that they're not sitting there worried, who do I ask? What do I do? They know that they have a document they can go back to to tell them how to do it, or it will tell them who to talk to for questions. And that is huge. Training. This is also a big one. And it does take a certain amount of thoughtfulness, but also flexibility to make sure that you are meeting your volunteers where they are. Whatever you do, not say, welcome to my site. Here's your project over there. Go grab a shovel. I'll see you in an hour. Don't do that. Your volunteers will not be comfortable because there will be a lot of uncertainty. They will probably not be as productive as they would have been with training. And they most definitely will not do it 100% the way you want it done. They will do it the way they like to do it or the way they think it should be done. And that may not match what you actually need. It also helps volunteers build camaraderie, build that teamwork, that sense of belonging. It sets their expectations. So I threw in this picture as an example of training. These are some of our education and buildings and grounds volunteers. They are helping to clean one of our grindstones, which we have to do every time we grind corn for our gift shop. You have to take everything apart, deep clean it, and put it together again before we can grind for sale. So our volunteers are in there as part of their training for learning how to run the mill and how to give tours, physically doing the work. And during that experience, we're able to review parts of the history. They'd be like, oh, this stone is made out of granite, right? And we can say, no, it's actually made out of French burr. Or this section of the mill is this old, right? And we can say, yes, that's correct. Or they say, you know, they're working away with, you know, cleaning something and they're thinking about what they're doing in that space. And they're saying, well, what happens in this situation? And you have an opportunity while you're all mutually working on the same task to talk through some different scenarios that they might encounter while they're in that space. It's also a good time for feedback. No, that's not a great way to turn on the water wheel. That is how we break equipment. Let's do it this way instead. And just make sure everybody's on the same page. It is super helpful. And again, it really does help build that sense of teamwork and belonging and inclusion that gets your volunteers coming back. Documentation. This is one that, to be honest, when I started building our program, I didn't think that much about. It is something I should have been thinking about from the beginning, but we did catch up eventually. Documentation is huge. You need to know how many volunteers you have, how much effort they are putting in, and some basic like demographics type information if you are going to be asking for grants and if you are going to be doing any kind of fundraising that relates to volunteer effort. If you're saying, if you give us $5,000 for this project, we will match it with 500 hours of community service and volunteer work. They want to know who those volunteers are that are doing that work and where they're coming from. They want to know, the funders want to be confident that you can match what they are providing. Another piece for documentation, especially with students and scouts, they need to prove that they actually did the work to go back to their schools or their scoutmasters. Sometimes they're really on top of it and they bring their forms with them the day of, and you just have to sign, yes, so-and-so completed 3 hours of work today, and you sign off on it right there before they leave. What is more likely is they forget the paperwork and they don't think about it for like a month or two, and then they come back at the last minute. You've already seen a bunch of people and done a bunch of things in between then and their ask, and you have forgotten what they worked on or exactly how many hours they had. So it's really nice to have a record to go back and be like, oh no, right, they did archaeology for 5 hours so they can earn their archaeology badge. It's useful to have that record to back you up and get back to. The other thing that documentation is important for is celebration. Our volunteers do crazy, amazing, awesome things that make a huge difference on site and in our community. And we want to be able to celebrate those in a tangible way. You know, rather than saying, you guys are great, we can go in and say, you guys saved us $15,000 worth of tree work last year. You guys did the equivalent of a full-time person's job in trail maintenance and grounds care. You guys helped us document this new building that we didn't really know much about before. And now we know that this barn had 3 rooms and it had an addition put on at this approximate time. And this space was a stall. And this space looks like it had a dairy in it. Those are concrete specific things that you can turn to your volunteers and say, look what we did, look what we learned. And that again makes a huge difference. Those specific tangible things that they can point to and say, I helped with that. Because again, numbers aren't everything. So it's not just, yay, you did 20 hours. You didn't, you only did 2. It's, you made a difference. And here is a specific way that you made a difference. Okay. How do you keep them? Got them in the door, you got them trained. Nobody likes to spend all that time and effort on training your volunteers just to have them leave you after a month. So these are some things that have worked for us. Communication. It's huge. Communicate your expectations. Communicate what you need clearly, specifically, so everybody's on the same page. The other thing to communicate, sorry about that. Opportunities change. You may have a new opportunity come up that wasn't there when you started. You need to let your volunteers know. You need to communicate that. You also need to effectively communicate gratitude. Say thank you every time they are on site, while they are working, while they are walking out the door. Hey, thanks for your help today. Make sure you tell other people how awesome your volunteers are. Bragging about your volunteers is a good thing to do. Send thank you notes after special events. You're definitely not doing it the day of. You're all tired. It's been a long day. But in the next week, just drop them an email. Hey, thank you so much for helping take care of parking. It went really smoothly this year. Or thank you so much for coming out and demonstrating spinning, wool spinning. We got really awesome compliments from some of our visitors about that. Those sorts of specific thank yous. Again, it's that tangible, here's how you made a difference. Here's the impact that you had. And don't just assume that they know that, because a lot of times they don't necessarily have the time to put it into a larger context in the moment. You know, people take time to process things. Another important piece of communication is communicating why we are doing what we're doing. This is especially important with really large projects. So we have been working on restoring our water system and putting in a new water wheel. We were dealing with some damage caused by siltation and flooding, and then our water wheel aged out. We had to replace it. Those are all big projects, and they involve multiple steps. And some of those steps had delays in them. So it's easy to be like, yes, today we're working on this. They're like, okay. So we moved some sandbags, that's fine. But you ask them to do 5 days worth of sandbags, and unless they know why, you're going to get pushback. They're going to be like, why are we moving these? Why can't we work on something else? So even if it does seem like a tedious thing, putting it in context helps. We have to do this step before we can move on to that next really cool thing. We have to get A done before B and C and D and so on. It does help. It keeps things from getting tedious and keeps you from having to deal with quite as much pushback and, razzing about particular tasks. I guess is the best way to put it. It's more like, oh, sandbags again. Okay, fine, because it's going to get us a water wheel. Not, sandbags again. Why am I here today? Yeah, so there's communication in all your areas. Also allowing them to communicate to you and contributing their thoughts, their opinions, not just after the fact, but in the planning process. This is something that we've started in the last 2 years. Some of our volunteers came to us specifically and said, we would like an opportunity for more input. And so we started doing monthly volunteer get-togethers. That's literally what we call them. They're just volunteer get-togethers, nothing fancy. We alternate months between breakfast and like an evening get-together. And we do updates. We say, here's what's going on this project. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's what's coming up. So we're not here yet, but get your head around the idea that soon we're going to be working on this project. It also helps understand, for us to understand where our volunteers are seeing issues and where their priorities are, because our issues and their priorities, etc., may not match. Some of that comes back to communicating effectively. We think we're all on the same page, but they're really missing why those sandbags are so important. We need to have some face-to-face time for dialogue. Or we did an activity a couple of years ago and we tried it one way. They come back when it's time to do it again. We're talking about it at the volunteer get together and they're like, hey, the last time we did it, I remember this didn't go as smoothly. I've thought about it. I think we should try it this way. Sometimes we're like, no, we actually need to do it the way we did it before for a reason. And other times it's like, oh no, that's a great idea. Let's get what we need to make that happen. But just having that opportunity for two-way communication is very important. Also, giving them a chance to have some ownership in the work, showing off what they've done. We didn't excavate this wheel pit. Our volunteers, Tom and Bruce and Mike excavated that wheel pit. They did a really cool job. I have seen other places where staff have kind of co-opted volunteer achievements, that they don't give credit where credit is due. They say, oh yeah, we did this. Like, well, no, you were a part of the project, but those volunteers over there did the hard work. They were the ones with the shovels. They were the ones with the hammers. They were the ones out there, in the 90-degree weather. Give them credit where it is due. And they get to brag too, which is always good. Let's see. Leadership and responsibility. If you have a really awesome, rock solid volunteer, give them a next step up. Say, we have a volunteer who's put in 30 hours removing invasive plant species from the trails, and he's been doing it by himself. Well, now that we have a couple other people interested, let him do the training. Let him show them the ropes. Let them work together. And it just shows that experienced volunteer that they are trusted, their expertise is respected, and it knits that community closer together and makes it easier for the staff too, because you don't have to worry about training every single volunteer individually or supervising every single individual person on site on the same day. Building personal connections between volunteers is huge. It's that sense of community. Nobody wants to be the volunteer who's stuck in this room on floor 1, and the other volunteer is stuck, on the 3rd floor, and another volunteer is stuck 2 miles down the trail. Nobody's having fun with that. Everybody's working individually. Nobody gets to talk with anybody else. That's boring. If people are looking for a sense of community, that's not the volunteer job they're going to stick with. So thinking about grouping volunteers together with shared interests, letting them build relationships through training, through shared endeavors. You're going to build those relationships that are going to tie your volunteers closer together to your organization. And that's going to keep them around longer. Celebrating achievements. So we started off saying thank you in a lot of different ways. We were like, all right, let's bake cookies for Christmas. Let's have a holiday party. Well, that's not what our volunteers wanted. They don't want cookies because they can never get on site during Christmas. They're busy. They got other stuff to do. Their cookies got stale by the time they got there. They were traveling. They couldn't make it to that one night volunteer thing in December. So we started looking at ways that matched what they needed. And what we ended up with, besides our ongoing monthly get-togethers where we do say thank you, is our volunteer star program. So we have a specific picnic during National Volunteer Week, which was last week, that celebrates the year's accomplishments. We invite all of our volunteers, representatives from all of our groups that have made a big difference, and we do a number of awards. We also present a volunteer impact report that has little categories, sub reports on like 8 different project areas. And we specifically thank volunteers by name in that document. So they can take it to other people and brag about it and say, look, I got into the report, my picture's in there, my name is in there. We do special plaques, and that's what's in this picture is one of our volunteer star awardees. So we do plaques for volunteers who have made incredible contributions to the site. So volunteers who have contributed 1,000 hours, 2,500 hours, and 5,000 hours to the site over their volunteer careers. And then, and those are as volunteers reach those milestones. We don't pick them out every year. This year, we only had one person who hit one of those milestones. Next year, we might not have any. But we do also try to give out an award for a group of merit that the staff and volunteers kind of vote on every year as like a nomination process. So these guys in this picture with our site manager, Keith, are representatives from Davidson School, which is a program under Elwyn. These guys come out every Thursday during their semester and help with whatever needs help with. They're picking up sticks around the buildings. They're cleaning windows. They're helping with mailings, all that kind of stuff. They are a rock solid support all the time that is always there. And we wanted to celebrate that. And so that's through this STAR program is one of the ways we've taken to making sure that appreciation is felt. We do also celebrate smaller accomplishments with special certificates. So like this year, all of our millwright shop volunteers got a certificate because we got all the pieces of the water wheel done this past year. We are now in the assembly and fitting it together phase. That's huge. We also celebrated one of our volunteers who has put 13 years into the public archaeology program. And then we gave certificates to all of our grounds volunteers, specifically for their hard work with picking up fallen limbs and downed trees after all of the wind storms this year. It made a huge difference. We would be, our trails would be impassable without their work. That's something that deserves to be specifically recognized and honored. And that's one of the ways that we do that. Also during National Volunteer Week, we have snacks like granola bars, simple stuff, pretzels, coffee, and then cold drinks and water available in the visitor center every day that week with notice to the volunteers like, please stop in and get some stuff. You don't even have to volunteer today. We appreciate you. Come and grab a granola bar and say hi. have a cup of coffee. Um, Grab a cold water on your way out when you're done working on the trails. And that seems to be appreciated by our volunteers. So again, honoring their commitments, celebrating those achievements, making sure that they know that you appreciate it. Um, it goes a long way to keeping them around. And then the last thing, which kind of underlies everything, you got to make it fun. Nobody's going to come volunteer at your site if they're doing work that they don't understand why they're doing it. They find it tedious and boring, and they don't like what they're doing. Make sure you're matching your volunteers, their skills, their interests with things that are going on site that they would like to do. Um, Playing games, being enthusiastic. If you're not excited about the activity, or if you don't appear enthusiastic about the activity, why are they going to be enthusiastic about it? Even if you are so tired, you've talked to 500 kids that week, your brain is mush, just fake it till you make it. They won't know. They'll get there eventually. Um, Also, this is especially good with students and corporate groups. Make games, make competitions. So I had a Girl Scout troop here this past weekend pulling invasive garlic mustard. And so we made it a contest to see if they could pull more garlic mustard than the group that had come the day before. We had 8-year-olds who pulled together. There were 7 of them. They pulled 150 gallons worth of garlic mustard in 2 hours. Would they have done that if we hadn't given them a challenge? I think they would have gotten bored after an hour and been like, can we go home now? Can we do something else? But we made it fun, and they got really into it, and they made a huge impact, and it makes a difference. So this is a lot of information. Um, what questions do you have? Yeah, Kate.
What do you use to keep track of all of your hours?
For individuals, we use Past Perfect.
Oh, okay.
We use the contact organization feature. There's a tab that you can put in volunteer hours.
Okay.
It's also where I keep like all of our emergency contacts for volunteers, and like their work preferences, like I'm not available Wednesdays, or I can only do spring and summer, that sort of information. For groups, because it gets a little more confusing for me, I keep it in a spreadsheet, because like especially corporate groups, your contact between years might change. Um, you might have a group one year and they never come back again, that sort of thing. So for groups, I find just an Excel sheet easier, but for regular individuals, Past Perfect.
And then you can like pull those reports and send that off. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I will say it's not it is not what Past Perfect was designed for. It is clunky, but it's what we've got. There are other options out there, but they're more expensive.
Yeah. So I have Past Perfect. We used to have our membership on there, but we stopped using it because it was too clunky. So
Yep.
yeah.
We actually are working with a volunteer who has a lot of database design experience, and we're exploring possibly making our own database for that kind of thing.
Great.
But that's sort of a in development discussion kind of phase right now. We haven't really rolled anything tangible out yet.
Well, if you come up with something that could be replicated in other sites, right? Like share.
Yep. George.
It was useful to hear kind of your humble beginnings, how you built it, the successes you've had, and what you learned from doing it. And I think any good volunteer program has a good leader, and you're not only a good leader but a good presenter. So thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll second that. We do a lot of volunteer work, but we don't do what you do. nearly as well as you do from what you're describing. So it was great. I
So
have one question. I'm sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
One quick question. Um, it's actually not quite related. When you described people taking pictures, I wonder how you handle photo things as far as releases and things.
Mhm.
It's always tricky as to how you use your photos and stuff. Do you just ask people verbally, or do you get a release, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so all of our regular volunteers know that I am going to harass them for pictures. Um, as you can see by this presentation, I like to document. It's important.
Yeah.
Um, and I also bug the rest of our staff, be like, I don't have a good picture of Brian. Somebody please get me a picture of Brian because he keeps hiding from me when I'm out there. They all know that's happening, and we're pretty upfront. If you don't want to be in a picture, just tell me you don't want to be in a picture today. Um, Especially like our archaeology volunteers, sometimes, they're gross, they're muddy, they've been in the trenches all day. They're like, not today. Don't take my picture today. Um,
So all your pictures are volunteers, pretty much. They're not public folks.
so on this slide, for example, almost everybody is one of our regular volunteers.
Hmm.
For group shots, so like on the top row, the group of Girl Scouts there with the trees they planted, I specifically ask their adults in the moment
Right.
and
Okay.
say, I am going to take pictures. Are you okay with me taking pictures? And then I also ask the kids, try to include a little bit of autonomy in there as well. Yeah,
Mhm.
George.
How about the person who you showed being your volunteer photographer at special events? How do
Mhm.
they handle releases?
Same thing. So she has a prominent badge that says event photographer, and she will ask. Like she makes a point to be like, hey, can I take a picture of your kids while they're in the right shop talking to one of our volunteers? It's um specific asks in the moment for those kinds of events. So like the bottom middle picture is from our summer camp. Jack in that picture in the blue shirt is well, now he's staff, but at the time this picture was taken, he was a volunteer program assistant. We have all the kids sign photo waivers as part of the registration process.
Yeah. So
I,
do we.
I've found that sometimes if they seem a little hesitant to let you take a photograph, I say, "Can I take it from behind?"
Yes,
And they allow that.
that is another good one. If you say I won't get their faces in it, that often, yeah, that often helps with hesitations. And it's okay, if they say no, they say no. There's going to be other people to take pictures of.
Mhm.
Just being respectful on all parts of the photography transaction is important. No, what I was going to say, kind of a little bit more background. I am not a volunteer coordinator professional. I'm a biologist. Um, I have been volunteering myself as an individual, I don't know, since like the age of 6. Volunteerism is something that is important to me personally. And I know what I've enjoyed about volunteer experiences in the past, but I have also done my homework. Um, if you're not familiar with the Delaware Valley Delaware Valley Association of Volunteer Administrators, that is an awesome network.
Mhm.
We also have a little smaller one that's the Brandywine Valley Volunteer Managers Group. That is a good network. That I really enjoy that group from you know, I had this thing pop up. I've never seen it before. Have you encountered this? How did you handle it? Um, and then there are tons of organizations out there that put out podcasts and webinars about how to be a good volunteer coordinator, how to build a good program. Um, and I sign up for those, and if I see a topic that looks useful, I'll sign up for it. So the
Great.
information is out there. You just pay attention.
That's a big. Yep. Yep.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to can I give a sneak peek that Andrea Silva from the America 250 PA Delco is gonna try and work on having a Delco Volunteers website, like specifically like a volunteer match thing for people in Delaware County. And I believe it's going to be free. And uh, but we'll know more about it in the fall. So the I believe the Heritage Commission seminar in the fall will be working on that to try and workshop like how to get your sites listed on there and how to get people to match to that. So but it's still kind of dependent on grants as to what that looks like. So hopefully you get the grant and then it'll be uh good. But if you have any suggestions for what you might want to be looking for in that, I'm sure that we'll be interested in knowing what your thoughts are about that.
I will say, just personal observation here, ask for ages. Um, that is a detail that I've found to be the last one that people are willing to give you specifically. But it makes a
Yeah.
difference for what you can realistically have them do.
Yeah, like not just like under 18 and over 18, but like,
Yeah,
older and younger adults
yeah.
too. Yeah. So yeah, we have a great group of at Nighter Hall, we have a great group of like of volunteer gardeners and then like for our like Heritage Festival and stuff like that. But we have a whole bunch of people that only come out for that one day. So just trying to get people to come the rest of the time. But like I have had trouble sometimes with the board being like, well, like then like oh I don't want to have the volunteer because then I would have to spend the time training them. And I was like, yes, that's the point. And then you don't have to do all the work. So I was like, um, so yeah, like having when you said like having specific projects and like training and stuff, but like once you get going, because that's how I started with the Historical Society, I asked to volunteer and now I'm president, so it does kind of work. That's
Yeah, I know that.
time in. So,
Yeah, I would say like for me personally, one of the biggest like turnoffs volunteer program wise is when the staff act like volunteers are a burden. It really bothers me. And I don't blame volunteers for walking away from those programs. You look at that and you're like, well, they don't want me here. Why would I be here?
mm,
So that's something I try to be super cognizant of. Like even when I'm tired, when I really, really don't want to be training or supervising a volunteer, just make it work. It's worth it.
does anyone have any other questions?
No, just thank you. It was a great talk, Jessica.
Yeah,
Good.
thank
I'm
you very
glad you
much,
enjoyed it.
Jessica. Yeah.
Jessica.
Yeah. All right, great. So I'm gonna end it now. Thank you all very much for coming, and I'll be posting it on the DCHPN website um in the next day or so. Okay. Thanks very much. Bye.
Good night.